Hey there, thank you for tuning into the Designated Pundits. This is episode 29 of 29. We are there. We will have completed our season preview, but first, the 2024 Houston Dynamo. We are joined today by Dustin Richardson from Bayou City Soccer. Dustin, how you doing?
Good, guys. Thanks for having me. Last but not least, I guess.
Last but certainly not least, although I have to say, for a lot of last season, my eye was not on the Houston Dynamo. It was that final stretch where it's like, whoa, these guys, we got to see what's going on there in Houston. Is that how it felt from the inside?
Yeah, I think coming into the season, you had you're seeing all these MLS picks, the expert picks coming out now. At the beginning of last season, it was, 12th, 13th, 14th. Dynamo were kind of, and also they had basically an entire new team, brand new coach. So I don't think anybody really knew what to expect. And then, Ben Olsen kind of got them clicking, and they figured out, he's talked about it, kind of figuring out how they wanted to play and how they play. And they just, like you said, they started to click, and it was all of a sudden all the way to the Western Conference Final.
They lost one game from July 13th through the end of the regular season, and then the loss in the conference final to LAFC. Let's take a closer look here with some graphics at what happened last season to the Houston Dynamo. Guys were 14, 9, and 11, finished fourth in the West with 51 goals scored. That's pretty good. 38 goals allowed, third best in Major League Soccer. That's exceptional. 6-4-1 to finish the regular season. They lost 2-0 to LAFC in the conference final. 2023, what a year.
Yeah, like I said, it exceeded, I think, all kinds of expectations. They also won the U.S. Open Cup, which obviously has been in the news a lot here recently.
Of course.
But as the defending champions, we don't know what's going to happen with the Dynamo if they get to defend their championship or not. But yeah, that was part of that kind of late season run. They went to Miami. Obviously, Messi didn't play, but they won the Open Cup final in Miami. And then just kind of springboarded off that, clinched the playoffs for the first time since 2017. So it was a long drought here. Back to the playoffs, and then, got hot at the right time.
Now, we had a long conversation with our previous guest from Toronto, Jeffrey Nesker, about the U.S. Open Cup situation. Thankfully, most of it was off camera, but you guys won that last year. Huge trophy, huge moment. Hector Herrera comes out, and he says that was the most important title he's ever won. His wife said it was the happiest she's ever seen him. Are we buying or selling that?
It's kind of one of those in the moment things, right? Like you just won it, so it's kind of thing. But I will say Hector has been he's been very bought in since he got here. He talked about that it was a project, and he knows he was kind of spearheading this rebirth of the Houston Dynamo and what they had been. So I think he genuinely feels like this is kind of not his doing, but he has had a big role in this. The foundation of what they've been trying to rebuild. Obviously, last year was a big step forward in that, and Herrera was one of the best players in the league, made the best 11. So I think he may not think that if you ask him now, but in the moment, it was probably he was probably very very happy. James Harden was there. It was a whole thing,
I think that silverware you hang around your neck might have been a little more, the goldware around his neck might have been a little more important.
Yeah.
Of course, he also won the Spanish championship, two-time Portuguese Super League Cup, one-time Portuguese champion, and one-time Gold Cup winner. That was in 2015. So a lot of trophies there. Not sure if I buy into it, but I do love to see that there is a world-class player buying in and, being a community member for a Major League Soccer team.
Absolutely. And I think there may be some truth to him feeling that this is a special trophy to him because of how influential he was on this team, being a real leader, for this team. I'm sure there were other trophies that he won where he felt like, I was kind of a passenger on that team, or just a role player. And he comes into this Houston team. And he goes, no, this is one I can own. I can own that trophy. I am a leader on this team. So there's probably some truth to that.
Yeah, he was pretty much their key piece last year. What they did was through Hector pretty much at all times. He had, you can see it right there, 11 assists. He basically ran the show for them.
Yeah. I remember him kind of gathering the team up, especially early in the season, to have really on-field, player huddles and discussions um, as they were kind of working things out. But let's talk about some of the other contributors because Hector, of course, great player, didn't do it all on his own. Um, so let's maybe go through some of these. Amin Bassi, 10 goals, 1 assist. Corey Baird, 8 goals, 5 assists. Great return for him. Hector Herrera, as we mentioned, 4 goals, 11 assists. Nelson Quinones, 4 goals, 1 assist. And Adalberto Carrasquilla, 3 goals, 5 assists. You want to take us through these? Maybe give us like an MVP, maybe somebody who overperformed.
Yeah, it was kind of coming into the year. It was like, where are the goals going to come from? They had Sebastian Ferreira, who's their designated player striker, and he kind of got in Ben Olsen's doghouse right away. They ended up actually sending him on loan for the rest of the year, like just got him out of out of everything. So it was kind of like, where are the goals going to come from? It turned out to be Baird in the end. Baird he kind of played on the wing some, and then they moved him to center forward, kind of playing as a number 9, and he did really well there. Nelson Quinones kind of came into his own. He's a under 22 player that they got from Colombia. He was on loan, and there was a lot of talk about, well, this loan is obviously not going to get extended because he's not that good. And he's talked about it. I think Hector was a big part of it. He says, Hector kind of took him aside and was like, hey, if you want to do this, if you want to like make a career out of this and maybe go to Europe one day, it's time to step up. And he had a really good year. And Amin Bassi scored a lot of penalties. A lot of those goals were penalties. He had like 5 games in a row or something. That was an MLS record with a penalty kick, which was wild. But he was kind of their main guy in the middle. Ben Olsen moved him and Carrasquilla a little bit between right wing and central midfield, switching those two. So yeah, they kind of were the sum of their parts more than a star player. Ferreira's back this year, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So we'll see kind of how he integrates back in.
Is there anybody on this list that maybe underperformed your expectations? Successful season, but somebody that maybe didn't quite live up to the hype?
Like there was a lot of talk coming into the year, obviously, about Ferreira because he had come off of, I think he had 13 goals in 22, and he just didn't do anything. He played the first couple of games, really couldn't even get many shots, many looks, and they sent him away. It was a weird situation because they didn't really like Ben Olsen. Just kind of he's one of those old school. He's an MLS guy, lifer. He's kind of one of those old school guys, and he just talks about guys putting in effort on the defensive end, and Ferreira was clearly not doing that, and he just kind of got the boot. So he went from 13 goals, darling of the team, designated player, to basically out the door. Now he has a second chance. It's going to be interesting to see how him and Olsen kind of get along this year.
Yeah, definitely something for us to watch. Bob, you want to take us through maybe these next ones?
Let's look at some outgoing players. You have Corey Baird. He is out, and Teenage Hadebi, your center back from last year. Let's talk about what those guys meant. Corey Baird has been kind of a journeyman, and he's spent most of his career without half the goals that he scored last year, and just kind of turned it on for you guys at the right time. Hadebi was obviously part of an elite defensive unit back there.
Yeah, Baird, we talked about a little bit. He kind of just clicked. I don't know if it was Olsen's system or if it was kind of Herrera and those guys around him, but he found himself, being that kind of guy to lead the attack and be the goal scorer. He left in free agency. He went to FC Cincinnati, so
he likes the orange, I guess. But I think for you guys, it was lightning in a bottle. I think expecting him to reproduce that anywhere else with any other cast around him is maybe a fool's errand. How do you think he's going to have success this year? Success being 8 to 12 goals.
That's going to be hard to do. And I think that was a lot of the talk. He's a free agent. He's going to want free agent money, and the Dynamo were just kind of not ready to do that. And going to Cincinnati, he's not replacing Brandon Vasquez like for like, but that's some big shoes to fill. So obviously he's probably going to get compared to him because he's the new striker, and as Vasquez is gone to Monterrey. But yeah, I would be very surprised. Nothing against Baird. He's a nice guy, but I would be very surprised to see him, get back to that 8 goals, 6 assists type numbers again.
Yeah, it does feel like a tall task for him. Although, you look back through his history, and he was putting up okay numbers for a while. He was kind of actually early Jordan Morris, comparisons were really statistically accurate.
He won Rookie of the Year, yeah, with RSL. I think
Mhm.
it was RSL. Yeah.
But let's turn the page. Let's talk about incoming players. Yeah.
Yes.
Look, Bob, I'm looking at these names, and
listen. I'm going to give it a try because I get names wrong all the time. I have no shame. Steven Enor Gyamfi. So that's funny. An attacker you guys brought in, and it looks like he was from a minor league system somewhere.
He was their first round pick this year in the draft. Yeah, he's from Clemson. No, not Clemson. I'm gonna get it wrong. Their other draft pick was from Clemson. He's from college though. Yeah.
Virginia. He was from Virginia Cavs.
Yeah, Virginia.
Next up is Sebastian Kowalczyk.
That's good. See, he's Polish, so you got that Polish pronunciation.
Lots of Eastern Europeans in this area of New Jersey. I was going to nail that one the whole time. Scott had no faith in me.
I had less than no faith, but I had even less faith than that in me. So great job.
Then you got John Gregus and Gabriel Segal. Are any of these players expected to slot in and be an everyday starter? Kowalczyk, I like that he's on this list because he came kind of in the summer last year, but he didn't really play a lot. And he talked about it this offseason. We talked to him. He came to the team, and the team was kind of set, so he didn't really have a role. It was his first time leaving Poland. He's young. He doesn't really know anybody. So he just kind of was over here just kind of learning the ropes. But now this year, I think there's going to be a lot on his shoulders, especially early in the season because Hector Herrera is injured right now. So Kowalczyk is probably either going to have to play in the midfield in Herrera's place, or they'll move Carrasquillo or somebody back to the midfield, and Kowalczyk will play on the wing. So I think they're expecting a lot out of him this year, and that was probably their intention when they brought him in last year. He was never going to really break into the team that they had, but this year it's kind of his chance to kind of show up and show out. There was rumors over the weekend that a Polish team was looking at him with their transfer window about to close. He was going to go back to Poland, months after he got here, but apparently he told them thanks but no thanks. He wanted to stay in Houston and fight, and so he looks to be a key guy this year, and it'll be interesting to see kind of where they play him and how they use him.
Now let's get down to the X's and O's: team, coach, formation, tactics. What would we expect to see on a normal game for the Houston Dynamo?
Years ago, there was always the DC people used to talk about Benny ball, with Ben Olsen. I don't want to call him Benjamin. But the old Benny ball style of, just kind of rough and ugly, and it's not going to be pretty, but they're going to win. But the Dynamo are a little advanced to that. They play a lot through their midfield. Obviously, they have 3 great midfielders, Herrera, and then whether it be Carrasquillo or Bassi in the midfield, and then Artur, who is probably one of their more underrated guys, used to play for Columbus, won some MLS Cups there. He's kind of their defensive midfielder. So their midfield, they like to have the ball. They like to keep the ball in the midfield, kind of play it around there. Herrera will be on the ball a ton when they are in possession, and they kind of look to just spring guys into the attack and get guys forward. They like to use their fullbacks. Griffin Dorsey, who was kind of a revelation last year as well. He's back this year. He re-signed. He's pretty much a wing from right back. He plays right back, but he gets way upfield into the attack. So it's kind of one of those, hold the ball, pass it around, wait for openings kind of thing, and then hopefully somebody can finish on the end of it.
So I pulled up a little depth chart here. It's a modified kind of 4-1-2-3, 4-3-3, depending on what you'd want to call it at any given time. Let's start from the top. Sebastian Ferreira, we think he's going to get the chance. Is that true?
Yeah, he pretty much is the guy right now. Thorell Farson, who had been with the Dynamo for a couple of years, their former first-round pick, they sold him to Europe this offseason, so he's gone. He didn't really have much of a role last year anyway. Baird was the guy. But with Baird gone and not really any other forwards on the roster, it's going to be him, and Aliu is probably going to have to play on the wing because Nelson Quinones is out for the season now, unfortunately. He tore his ACL playing for Colombia in the Olympic qualifiers, so they're very thin on the front three right now. They don't really have any natural wingers outside of Quinones, because Bossi's kind of a central midfielder and Karaskia is a central midfielder, but they kind of play him on as a right winger, but where Dorsey kind of actually plays right wing. So yeah, the front three is a huge question mark.
But what isn't a question mark is this electric midfield. Hector Herrera, Coco Carrasquilla, someone who, highlight reels every single week. You turn on Extra Time, you turn on the rap whip around show every single week. And for Coco, it didn't really turn out to reflect much on the scorecard. How do you see them fitting in this year? And then Artur behind him. There's no better three in Major League Soccer.
Yeah, we've talked about this, with our Bayou City folks, that you put that three up against pretty much any three in MLS as far as midfielders. Karaskia just actually re-signed today. He got a new contract. There was a lot of interest from Europe, from Liga MX apparently, but Karaskia is staying, so that's good news for the Dynamo. Signed him to a new contract, so maybe if he does go to Europe, they'll get even more money for him. But he's going to stick around for a while. Herrera's injured. The team's been very quiet about what exactly is going on with him. He's in Spain right now getting treatment for something. It's basically all we know. And he's going to miss the early part of the season. That's kind of how they have laid it out. So he's going to be back soon, we think. But with Herrera, with Karaskia, you have two very dynamic players. Karaskia, like you said, he doesn't get on the score sheet a lot, goals, assists. He's more of a he kind of does the dirty work. He moves the ball. He gets forward. He's just one of those players that you want on your team, but you look back at it and you'll be like, man, Karaskia had a crazy. He plays amazing for Panama. I think a lot of Dynamo fans get frustrated sometimes because he's like the greatest midfielder in the world when he plays for Panama. He won the best player at the Gold Cup this last year. They got to the final. They beat the U.S. And Karaskia was, the superstar. And that's kind of what started gaining a lot more of the interest from Europe. But the three of them, Herrera, Artur, Karaskia, is going to be what drives them. It's what's going to make them or break them this year. And hopefully for Dynamo fans, Herrera isn't out long term.
Let's talk about the depth then behind those guys. What happens? Herrera's going to be out, at least at the beginning of the season. We've seen sometimes where clubs are cagey about that and it drags on longer. Is it next man up mentality? Can it be? Is the depth good enough for that?
Yeah, we talked to Ben Olsen, after Herrera got injured, and he basically said, there's no like for Hector Herrera. There's no one that can replace what Herrera does on the field and as the captain, as the leader. So yeah, it's going to have to be next man up. They signed Jan Gregus, who's a veteran. He's been around the league. He knows what it's like. He's played on the national teams. So he's probably going to be the guy that slots in there for Herrera if Bossi's playing on the wing. That's probably their biggest problem, and one of the things that fans I think have been frustrated about this offseason is their depth. They're just not very deep. Behind Grey Goose, it's basically Brooklyn Reigns, who is a 18, 19-year-old. Luis Caicedo is apparently in Colombia with family issues, so he may not even be back. So it's just another one of those. The front line is not that deep. but the midfield is, while it's great, it doesn't seem as deep as they would want it to be. Grego's at, I think he's 33.
Yeah, that's what it is. I think you guys have some depth. You have some wiggle room. It's for their age. You don't have enough pieces for me.
Yes, no, that is very fair. Yeah, Grego's at 33. If you're going to ask him to, carry the load, because the Dynamo are in the Champions League, they're in MLS play, they're going to be in Leagues Cup. We don't know what's going to happen with the Open Cup. They're going to play a lot of games this year.
We talked about Kowalczyk earlier, or Kowalczyk, yeah, whatever. I apologize to him and his family for that. I'm going to call him Sebastian.
We call him Polish Seba.
Polish Seba. I love that. That is probably the opportunity for him, though, to stake a claim in this midfield. If he wants to say, like, hey, look, I don't care. I'll do it. I'll do the dirty work. I'll get up. I'll get back. Like, this is probably his opportunity. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think he knows that, the Dynamo had their kind of preseason media stuff, and he was, saying all the right things, like, I like to play as a 10. I like to play in the midfield, but I'll play on the wing. I'll play, in a number 8. I'll do whatever the team needs me to, basically. Because, like I said earlier, he didn't play that much last year. And, for him, I think that was kind of a very awakening type thing. He was like a star player in Poland, and he came here to basically sit the bench for most of the season. And he got to see these guys win an Open Cup and go to the playoffs and go on this deep run. And he wasn't really involved that much. So with Herrera injured, with Quinones injured, there's going to have to be multiple guys step up, and he's definitely at the top of that list.
I love that. And sometimes that's how you find, good players in secondary positions or something maybe you never thought of before, but it comes out of necessity. Sometimes there's just utter failure. It seems like there's very little in between when you have to push someone in there.
Yeah, so it's kind of with him, I think, this year. So we'll see how it goes.
For our next segment, we're going to ask you to take out that crystal ball because we have a couple questions for you, and I want to see how these can be addressed. First question is, did you improve anywhere?
It's hard to say, because we saw that list of players they brought in. They didn't bring in a lot outside of, Kowalczyk, who's going to kind of play a role this year. Aliu was kind of the same. He came in the middle of last year. A young guy, U22 guy. If I had to say they improved anywhere, it would probably just be in that Sebastian Ferreira, the real Sebastian Ferreira, the 2022 version of him is back. That's at least what Dynamo fans will want, not the 2023 version that had no goals and kind of was pouty, for lack of a better word, not wanting to, kind of do, and then went to Brazil on loan and didn't score any goals there. So it's like but he's been very good in this preseason. He scored like 3 or 4 goals. He is saying all the right things. Olsen is saying all the right things. So if they get him back as the 13-goal scorer that he was in his first season in MLS, because he showed he can play in this league, he can score goals, and they'll definitely be improved over what Corey Baird kind of gave them.
Can they hang with the big boys this year? You guys finished 4th last season, went on a kind of a Cinderella run. You had the Cup. You had a lot of other things going on. And overall, I would say it was probably, you'd consider it a very successful season.
Very successful, yeah. It's interesting it's interesting to see how they stack up with the teams in the Western Conference. Last year when they went on that playoff run, they didn't really things broke well for them. They were the 4 seed. They played number 5 RSL and beat in the best of 3, beat them 2 games to 1. 2 of those games went to penalty kicks. And then they didn't have to play the number 1 seed St. Louis because SKC beat them. So then the Dynamo beat SKC 1-0 in Houston, the 8 seed. So they never really got tested until they got to LAFC. They played them well, but ultimately lost. So they didn't come up against Seattle, St. Louis, Vancouver, those teams that were at the top of the West last year. So it's going to be interesting to see over a season how they kind of stack up with those teams, because the West also seems to be a lot better. Teams like Sporting, Vancouver, RSL, Colorado even have
this Western Conference, and we've mentioned, I've probably said this probably 15 times. Probably. They didn't want to get out of their own way. No one would step up and say this is our conference, and you see it by St. Louis City 56 points, Seattle 53, LA 52, Houston 51, RSL 50. You guys were all a draw away from moving up 1 or 2 or 3 spots.
Yeah, the West was just one of those weird, like you said, nobody wanted to kind of take it. Nobody wanted to, win the West. And St. Louis, nothing against them, but an expansion team finishing first place. Kudos to them, but that kind of just sums up how wild that the Western Conference was last year.
St. Louis would have been a 4 seed in the East.
I think Dynamo fans are happy we're not in the East.
Let's see now. Okay, so all that said, I think there's one other question on our storylines, and it's about the defense, because the real strength of this team was in a really dominant defense. Does this defense just run it back one more year of dominance, or do you see something else happening?
They're going to be really good again. I think they're just very sound. They're very good. Steve Clark, obviously in goal as kind of the leader. He's 38, 39. He's been around forever. He's won MLS Cups. He's won everywhere he's been. He's kind of their rock, he's still a very good goalkeeper. He's just one of those guys a veteran that you want back there. T.H. Hidebe, who you mentioned earlier, was one of their designated players, center backs, and he's gone now. But he got hurt last year early in the season and basically lost his starting job, never got back into the lineup to Mikel, who's a young Brazilian defender. And then Eric Sviatchenko, who they brought in from Denmark. He played for Celtic. He's played in the Champions League. He's really good. Like if people are out there looking at the Dynamo as someone that you might not have heard of who's really good, Sviatchenko has the potential to be one of the better center backs in this league. He's just very good on the ball. He's very good defensively. And then their fullbacks are very good. We talked about Dorsey, but Franco Escobar, they moved him from right back to left back because they basically didn't have any left backs last year. And he was asked to play left back, which he'd never really done, and he was very good at it. So they're basically, running it back, and I would expect them to be just as good as they were last year.
Love it. Look in your crystal ball. Tell us where you finish.
I've been bouncing around this with some of our guys at our site. It's been tough for me to kind of figure it out. It depends a lot on how long Herrera is out, right? Like if Herrera is out half the season, they're going to struggle to be in that 7, 8, 9 range. I think if Herrera comes back in May and he's Hector Herrera of last year, best 11, one of the MVP candidates of the league, I think they could be in that, 3rd, 4th, 5th again. So it's going to be a lot on what happens to Herrera. But if I had to pick, I'll kind of hedge my bets and say about 6th in the West.
That kind of lines up with what, Bob was predicting for them. I think hanging a little bit on that Hector Herrera injury. I was a little more optimistic in the context of last season, in the context of winning, right, the Open Cup and having really strong tournament runs at the end of the year. What does success look like in 2024 for this team?
I think they've talked about, rebuilding the Houston Dynamo, how just for years they were just a laughingstock basically in MLS. They didn't make the playoffs from 2018 to 2022. So it was just, nothing. There was just no buzz about this team. So I think just kind of getting back to being a consistent team that's consistently fighting for, top 4, fighting for Champions League, fighting for tournaments. Just this year, I think a success to them is going to be finishing back in that top 4-ish range and then making another run in the playoffs. I think they want that to be something that is now, just commonplace for them again. They want to be a team that is up there. When you talk about the Western Conference, the Dynamo are always kind of in there, like they're that Seattle, Sporting Kansas City that's just always there. They're always a contender. They always have a chance to get to MLS Cup or win MLS Cup. I think being back kind of where they were last year is going to be a success for them.
Can I add one more thing to that then? Because last year, my big knock on Houston was their away form. 3-9-5 away from home, right? Dominant at home, equally not dominant on the road. I think that's as a team, like Houston has got to learn to perform away from home if they want to be in that category, right? Because Seattle has learned how to win away from home, right? SKC at their best, they could win away from home. Has Ben Olsen talked about any, I guess, evolution in like tactics or strategy or whatever for this team this year to try and address that?
He talks about, being better on the road, and it's just a thing that they have to do. They have to be better on the road. And it's weird because from Olsen to the 5 coaches they've had before this that flamed out, they've been terrible on the road. Like every year, they 1 win, 2 win, 3 win type teams on the road, and that's just like awful. And it's just one of those things like Olsen and Pat Onstad, who's the GM, they've talked about bringing in these leaders, bringing in winners. Last year, they brought in like 19 new players, basically redid the roster. A lot of them were winners. Franco Escobar won it with Atlanta, won at LAFC. Artur won with Columbus. Steve Clark, all these guys. That kind of this winning mentality. They wanted to change, I think, the way that this team thinks about going on the road. Like, oh, we got a road game, we're probably going to lose type mentality that was just kind of around the team. So I think that's kind of been their, not tactic, but kind of way of like, we got to change the mindset. We have to like change the way this club sees themselves first, because going on the road, it's hard in this league. There's crazy long road trips. There's short week, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday type things that they play, but everyone has to do it. You got to suck it up and do it kind of thing. And that kind of goes back to Olsen's old school mentality too, just roll the ball out there and go do it. Stop making excuses kind of thing.
Love it. Dustin Richardson from Bayou City Soccer. Tell us one more time where we can find your work.
Yeah, you can find us BayouCitySoccer.net, Bayou City Soccer on all your social medias, Twitter, X, Instagram, Facebook, all those good things. You can find us there. We'll be covering the Dynamo, covering the Dash all season long. It's going to be fun.
Thank you so much. Good luck this season, and I'll catch everyone soon. Thank you for tuning in and watching last episode of the Designated Pundits. 29 teams, 29, like 20 days. But we did it. Now we get to talk about the regular season. Thank you so much for being our guest today, Dustin.
Thanks, guys.